I keep it still. This shit is real in the field, so I keep it still.
All right, that is our new theme song until they sue us or something, I suppose. That's JoJo X and P. Rico, I think. So that song was called Shit is Real in the Field, and this is the Real in the Field podcast from Field Goals. Typically hosted by Danny Kelly, but I'm Kenneth Arthur, and with me as never is Mina Kimes of ESPN The Magazine and lifelong Seahawks fan. And while Danny is at the Scouting Combine in Indianapolis, we wanted to do this every single week, and you never know when things are going to come up. So week 2, we already have a guest co-host. Mina, how are you?
Good, good. It's clearly the backup here.
Yes. Well, no, we were going to be our guest, and you just moved into the co-host role, which is 100%.
Yeah, let's do this.
So what we're going to start off with today is I wouldn't necessarily call it news, but it's February 19th, and sort of you're just waiting for something to happen to talk about, and what people are talking about today is a little bit of a Russell Wilson video where I guess he felt the need to explain himself about the final play of the Super Bowl. We're going to play a little bit of that video in just a second, but I mean, do you think that Russell Wilson has to explain himself?
So I haven't watched the video. As I told you via email,
right, but just in general, do you think that Russell Wilson needs to release
No, I mean, that's ridiculous, right? And I'm sure he didn't say anything particularly revelatory or interesting. I'm more alarmed by, I did click on the video, and I was more alarmed by the fact that every day he looks more and more like Josh Freeman.
Right.
And not like early Josh, like promising Josh Freeman, but like, 2 years in Josh Freeman. So that's what jumped out at me about the Russell Wilson Call Me Crazy video.
I feel like he looks like very tan. Like I don't know. Like, do you think Russell Wilson's going tanning?
What I was going to say. Yeah, he's been in New York too, so I don't know where he's picked up all that color. But he looks very shiny in the video. But yeah, to go back to your point, obviously he's not going to say anything shocking or interesting, right. And B, what is he going to say? I mean, unless he was like, I said X call and Dale overrode me and said Y. You know what I mean? It's not going to be.
Right. I mean, he wrote that, this is his thing, is that he says, sorry, it's not perfect. Sorry, if it's not perfect, there was no script here. I just want to talk directly to the 12s. And he's almost implying that what we all already think, which is that most of what he says is scripted. So it's sort of interesting, like, oh, this is me off the cuff. But it doesn't really come off as off the cuff. And I don't know if anything about Russell Wilson necessarily ever feels off the cuff. Whatever he says feels.
Except for his tolerance of 50 Shades, right?
Right.
Which was actually kind of weird. So whenever he says something weird or even like a little bit off, it is kind of compelling and strange. It's like when a computer has a glitch or something.
Right. It is. And it's definitely creepy. It freaks you out when he starts to feel. Because I only spent like 10 minutes with him once, and I thought that he was very nice, and I thought that he treats everybody that he's around like they are like, the person that he's paying attention to, and, he's not. Yeah. Treats everyone with respect. I did try and throw in a few, like, not curveballs, but just like, I want real answers, something that maybe you could not have prepared for. But, he's like a very good politician. He's always got something prepared.
And I feel like that's okay for a quarterback. I don't know. I've always felt like the quarterback should be the most stable person on the team, and when you have as many ups and downs as, say, the Hawks did last season, having that sort of unflappable rock in the middle is kind of a good thing, I think.
Right, and that's really Russell Wilson's best quality on the field. I think it's just his ability to always stay calm no matter what the situation.
Right, when you watch sound effects or whatever, and it is real. He really is unflappable.
Let's play a little bit of this video. We'll just start right with the beginning, and it's in quotes, is the title. I just got titled it "Call Me Crazy." So let's see a little bit of it.
Boom, it hits me, and it's a tough feeling. It's a tough feeling of losing. If anybody hates losing, I hate losing, and so being in that circumstance on the field in Arizona for Super Bowl 49, and them making a play, and us, me feeling like I didn't make the play, and knowing that it's over. All the hard work that you've put in all season long, all the amazing plays, all the plays that you didn't make, all the great games, all the comeback wins, all the things comes down to that one moment, and it feels like it's lost. I could sit here and talk to you about the whole game. I could talk to you about the plays that we made, the plays that we didn't make, the last play. I could replay that last 2-minute drive with you, but that's not what it's about for me. I'm here on Players Tribune talking to you right now because I want to let you know my thought process, where my heart comes from, where my mindset comes from.
Yeah, so now again, like you're not going to glean anything from this. I don't think there's anything really to learn from what he's gonna say because, I mean, it's all going to be still pretty cliche. And really, when he talks about all the amazing plays, all the comeback wins, all the wins, and blah blah blah, and obviously none of that stuff. That losing on that final play doesn't negate how important the rest of the season was because it was still a really successful season.
Mhm. Yeah. Listening to that, I mean, I don't want to keep harp on the whole Russell Wilson is a robot thing, but
Harp away.
It does come across as so scripted is he uses proper nouns in a way that like Siri might, or if you were proposing, he's like Arizona, Super Bowl 49. Like who says Super Bowl 49? You know what I mean? He has this weird. I wonder if it's something he's been taught or some sort of speech pattern. But the National Football League and television, he's kind of.
Right. I mean, there was a time when I was talking to him, he was doing, I guess you would call it a junket for the Microsoft Surface. So there was everybody that was out there that day, some of them were just directly talking to him about the Microsoft Surface, and so like when I had talked to him and he asked him about a play and he started to say, he said my Surface, and then he stopped himself and he went back to the beginning and he says Microsoft Surface Pro 2. Like, he had to say it that way.
Yeah, right. But it's we're talking about meaningless things, right? He doesn't need to say Super Bowl for it. It's kind of.
Oh, absolutely. But yeah, there's some sort of muscle memory in there where it's like, it's like I can't, for whatever reason, every time I type the word significant, I forget the first I. It's not that I forget it, but my fingers won't type it. So I can't type the word significant correctly the first try. And it's like you have to go back and redo it. And I think he said Super Bowl 49 probably 1,000 times, or Super Bowl 49 in Arizona, blah blah blah.
Yeah. Well, I guess in Russell Wilson real news, right? There's been a lot of tweets about his contract. Even today, I just saw Rappaport was tweeting something about the out-of-the-box contract.
So the only thing that I've heard anyone actually speculate about is a fully guaranteed deal. I don't know if you've heard any other sort of out-of-the-box contracts, and that's the whole thing. Is if it's really out of the box, then I would think that someone like John Schneider perhaps is the only one who really knows what that means.
Right. I don't know what that looks like other than fully guaranteed, which is the only thing that kind of makes sense to me.
So, I was just writing about fully guaranteed deals in a way earlier today for someone else, and it's funny because the NFL doesn't have fully guaranteed contracts. Except for the rookies and guys on rookie contracts and stuff like that now. But, when it comes down to the risk taken, I can't see necessarily when you've got a certain sect of players where there isn't any real risk. So I would definitely think that Russell Wilson is one of those guys where you can't envision a world really where he's not the starting quarterback in 5, 6, or 7 years, right?
Yeah, I mean, unless he has a puppy fighting ring in his house or something.
Right.
Or some kind of horrible injury, But
either a puppy fighting ring or a horrible injury. Those. The
guarantee certainly speaks to their if they do that right, it speaks to their confidence in his durability, which is one of his strongest attributes and something that I don't think is commented on enough.
Right. Even then, it's like look at the situation that the Bears are in with Jay Cutler. I guess it's like even though his contract isn't fully guaranteed, they're still sitting there, I think, in the third year. There's nothing they can do about the fact that they don't want him. But he's still
no one else wants him, right? So even if, right, exactly.
Yeah, so I think it's a fact of life that some, or a fact of football, that there are going to be some guys. There's going to be bad contracts on every team. There's going to be dead money that you don't like, but you can't necessarily also. It's definitely when you weigh that risk of, is
Right.
Russell Wilson going to be worth $16 million in 2019 versus, what if we don't sign him to this deal, we can't re-sign Bobby Wagner? Like, you would go for the former option, I
I
think.
agree. Yeah, unless you have like a Kaepernick style contract where you can't actually just completely cut him. Um,
Right.
but so then the question is, though, if they guarantee it, how much does that limit the max? How much are we looking at 20 or even under 20 if you guarantee it? I mean,
I think that would be the goal, right? Is that
yeah,
if you're going to guarantee it, that you would try to get underneath, you would try and get significant advantage. Now, I don't necessarily think I think still Russell Wilson has all the leverage, and I think every quarterback that's of that caliber and even a little bit below that caliber has a ton of leverage, because teams that don't have quarterbacks mire in mediocrity or worse for forever. So,
yeah,
when it's like, what would the Jacksonville Jaguars pay to have Russell Wilson? They'd probably they'd go insane with the amount of money that they'd spend for having a guy like Russell Wilson for the next 10 years.
yeah, yeah.
So
I mean, the only reason we do it at all is flexibility and fitting the puzzle together.
I
Um,
think if Russell Wilson has the confidence that he seems to have, that he wouldn't necessarily think, well, I don't need a fully guaranteed deal. I know that I'm going to be around in 7 years, so I'm
right.
not going to take less money just because it's guaranteed. I believe that I'm going to get a lot of guaranteed money over the life of my career, basically. He's the one who talks about 7 championships and all that kind of stuff or whatever. So I don't
Mhm.
think that he necessarily believes that he isn't worth the $25 million a year type salary, especially when you consider the fact that, I saw figures yesterday, and I don't remember them, but the amount that the cap has increased over the last 15
Right.
years.
And it is going to increase too.
Yeah, and it's increasing more and more, it seems like, every year. So there's no reason for him to think that he needs to, take a deal that's going to pay him, not going to pay him, say, $30 million in 8 years or whatever, because maybe that's what a quarterback of his caliber is worth.
You always wonder too how much goes. So the concept of a hometown discount is bullshit and silly. But if they say, okay, you take X guaranteed and we'll get you X receiver and you'll be good for you always wonder how much quarterbacks actually care about flexibility in terms of preserving the core of the team and creating an
Right.
environment in which they can succeed. I don't think they do a lot. Certainly not as much as we wish.
Yeah.
But
I mean,
yeah,
like, I know that, in certain situations, it's like when I talked to Demaryius Thomas a couple weeks ago, and I asked him, because the Broncos are in a they're in a pretty bad situation themselves. I mean, they've got a lot of free agents, and with Peyton Manning coming back, that's a good thing, I suppose. But at the same time, that means they're going to lose some guys like Julius Thomas, and
our
you
future
know,
tight end Julius Thomas, yeah.
yeah, exactly. And Julius Thomas, is supposedly turning down $8 million a year from the Broncos.
He did that
And
last year, right? He did turn that down. That
right,
really happened. Yeah. Okay.
so that's what goes around. But
Yeah.
so Demaryius Thomas, and I asked him, like, so do you even talk to the other guys like Wes Welker? I mean, these are your buddies, and do you guys talk about staying together? And he's like, not really. Those are
Yeah.
everybody has to do their own thing, and you can't really worry yourself about that kind of stuff. But I do think Russell Wilson definitely he has to keep it in mind, because he's like the third head of that Cerebus of Schneider and Carroll. Like, they have to work together, all three of them. And I think that's part of the reason that if there is any locker room divide, people see Russell Wilson as that other authority figure in the locker room, and there can be some resentment there. But he does have to be the one that sort of wonders, how are we going to actually get some wide receiver help or some tight
Right.
end help?
And he walked into a phenomenal situation, and he knows that, so I'm sure preserving that actually does matter to some degree.
Right. I mean, that's the thing, is he's going to see it just like, all these guys, like, when a lot of fans talk about, like, what they're worried about as far as the cap situation and shit, it's like they think that they know, like, that
Yeah.
they're seeing something that John Schneider hasn't, spent days, weeks, or months, mulling over, like when it's like, well, how are we we're never gonna be able to keep all these guys. They've thought about that.
Yeah. Right.
Like, they know what's made them successful, and they know what's coming, and they're going to do their best to plan it out. Maybe it is a situation where we're going to lose guys that we like but based on the fact that they think they can draft it. So,
speaking of which, did you listen to him today?
Schneider?
Yeah, talking about Maxwell, Lynch.
No. Why don't you fill me in a little bit?
I'm sure Danny's filing a live report right as we speak. But so he sounded like Maxwell's gone, right? Which has been sort of in the tea leaves for a while now. And the headlines are saying that, he talked about Lynch maybe retiring. I don't know. Hopes he gives the answer soon this week. There's a sense that, maybe there is a deadline of this week, which would be nice. But I don't know. I don't buy the retirement stuff personally. And then by the time this podcast comes out, I could look like an idiot for saying that. But just financially, first of all, his tone made me believe he doesn't maybe buy it either, although I could be wrong. But I just don't see it happening.
It is, that's the thing, is that I really feel that Lynch is the Tracy Jordan of the NFL. He doesn't really care. He's going to do what he thinks is almost the opposite of what you expect him to do. He's going to do the thing that frustrates you the most sometimes. He's going to do the thing that is the most Marshawn Lynch thing to do. So, despite the fact, and it just doesn't help that he's a running back, that he knows as much as anyone how much the toll takes on his body, and the fact of the matter is he's going to be rich beyond his wildest dreams for the rest of his life if he never plays again. So,
but the difference between him playing a little bit more and retiring financially is pretty significant for him. I think I read somewhere that he'd actually have to pay us if he retires this year. I'm not sure.
I don't know, maybe.
I can't remember all that, but we're talking. It's a big difference for him. So knowing that he is like any other human being, financially motivated to some degree, it really just doesn't make sense to me.
I've talked to some people this week that have told me a little bit about the negotiation process between Lynch and the team, and I can say that they're trying to work something out in the very short term. This week would definitely be the week to get it done, and then after that, if it would probably be a lot more just. You'd probably be waiting a while before anything was settled. I don't think he's going to retire anytime soon, and I don't think, unless he signs a contract extension this week, it might be a while before we hear any actual solid news on it again.
Well, we're probably going to draft a running back either way, don't you think? The question is where, right? And
yeah, I think that I think this is still a team that values running the football on offense more than anything else. So I definitely think that whether or not it's in the first round or the sixth round, they probably will. I personally still don't believe you draft running backs in the first couple of rounds these days. Maybe the second round. They got Christine Michael at the end of the second round, but I would hate to think that a team that still needs help on the offensive line and still needs help at wide receiver and still needs better tight ends and still needs more pass rushers and still needs more defensive tackles, I would hate to think that they would spend a pick on a running back in the first two rounds. So
I think the draft is so stacked this year that some early round caliber backs will probably drop to the mids.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting year. I don't follow college football that closely, but I follow it enough to know that Melvin Gordon is a very exciting player, and I know that from what friend of the show, Rob Statton, has said about Melvin Gordon, that he's the type of guy that's basically the Russell Wilson of running backs, that he's texting his guys, his teammates at 3 a.m. like, I'm working, what are you doing? That he's trying to push everyone around him. And, that's exciting to have that guy on your side. So
you don't think Kristen Michael's sending those back?
I think Kristen Michael probably has his phone turned off. I don't know if he's necessary. That's the thing is, we talk so much about so many players on this team, and I really don't know anything about Kristen Michael.
He's such a mystery. continues to be the biggest enigma on the team is what his deal is, why he hasn't gotten those touches. No one, I mean, who knows, right? I haven't even read rumors.
Yeah, he can't even crack the rumor mill. I mean, you would think there'd be something out there. I
Yeah.
guess he's so hidden as like this side piece that nobody even thinks to even ask Pete
There's
Carroll or John Schneider that much. Wait a minute, where's this guy that's supposedly going to be the best running back in the NFL in like 3 years?
They never talk about him too, which we should, talk about players they do kind of drop sly little mentions of. BJ Daniels. But they never talk about him. But I don't know. The reason I wanted to talk about, drafting it back is just because you sent me, when we were talking about what would happen if Marshawn did retire, you sent me a list of, potential cuts. And it's the most depressing list I've ever seen.
Well, it's definitely, it just depends, I guess, on your, I think there can be personal favorites and stuff like that. That's the thing is, any running back, it's just tough because this is not a good era for running backs. I've said this many times, I don't like DeMarco Murray as a running back.
Terrible. No, yeah, ooh, boy.
Like, that is going to be an ugly situation for someone, I think. And that's I like DeMarco Murray as fine as, a player and as a person, but
That's rude.
It's going to be, he carries the ball 420 times, he gets almost 500 touches. That team never planned on keeping him as far as I'm concerned. So, but after that, if Lynch were to go and if Kristen Michael was really not going to be a big deal on the Seahawks, the other options, some of them are, I like Mark Ingram. I think when he's healthy, he plays pretty well, especially this year he played pretty well.
Slotting into the Lynch role, first, his size is not comparable at all.
Right.
I like him. I think he's great in the role that New Orleans has for him, but I just don't see him filling that hole.
No, let's be honest. Marshawn Lynch is
irreplaceable.
He's a one of a kind. As far as I'm concerned, he's a Hall of Fame running back, and I know, some people will say he doesn't have the numbers for that, but compare it to the era, compare it to what he's done in the last 5 years, and the only better running back is Adrian Peterson, who has not done himself any favors. So. As far as I'm concerned, the best overall running back who's been the most valuable since 2011, it's Marshawn Lynch. So, as far as replacing him, probably not going to happen. Another guy is C.J. Spiller, who is not that good has not been very good. He was very good last year. A lot of people speculated that C.J. Spiller would be the guy they drafted in 2010, and then instead they drafted, Earl Thomas and Okung and traded for Lynch, which is interesting because the Bills were the ones that...
Terrible year of decisions for us.
Right. And C.J. Spiller wouldn't fill any sort of Marshawn Lynch role, but he would be, I think, an interesting piece. He sort of fills more of that, what they were looking for in Percy Harvin in terms of athleticism.
That's true. Does he return kicks?
I don't think so. I don't really know, who... It's so weird whenever you think of guys that should fill the mold for returning kicks, and then it turns out to be, Brian Walters or whatever.
I feel the same. I don't understand. I look at the players on our team. I'm like, why is Michael not competing for this job?
Right.
We see what God, I don't know. The kick return thing is a whole nother.
It's really just got to be a situation where I don't feel like Pete Carroll holds anyone back that earns playing time. So it's really got to be whatever's going on in practice. I can't think that it's just like a fumbling thing. I think there's got to be something else. Even if it's not, I can't even imagine that it's necessarily even just a pass blocking thing or a run blocking thing. It's got to be.
You don't see it on the field too. When we see him in preseason or the limited touches he has gotten. There's he doesn't have good spatial awareness. He didn't reach for the first down on one play. Yeah, he, screwed up a few times, but I've never seen anything that's given me a real explanation. That's how I feel. I don't know. What do you think?
It's all speculation on our part, and that's what they force us into. They put us into this corner where it's like we can't tell you what's going on with Kristen Michael, and maybe only Kristen Michael and Pete Carroll and the running backs, Carl Smith. No, that's the quarterbacks. And only them, Tom Cable and those guys. They might be the only one to know.
Let's move on.
We did talk a little bit though, since we've already talked about Russell Wilson and Marshawn Lynch. I know that for me personally, if someone were to give me a book deal, I would want to write Marshawn Lynch's story because being a very interesting guy, I'd be a very exclusive guy, and
Yeah.
so I was told this to someone else, and then we were talking about how, probably the worst biography to get, even though he's a star player. I don't know what you would write about Russell Wilson that necessarily jumps off the page. I think that Russell Wilson's biography would be something that you might like come free with a Kindle or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, his big book isn't going to be a biography. It'll be like a, leadership tips book that's sold at
Right.
or like a TED Talk or something. I mean, I personally think Bruce Irvin probably has the most compelling backstory on the team, and he's a really colorful, legitimately pretty funny dude.
Right.
So I'd want to read his book probably if I had to choose. Yeah.
That's a good point. I mean, I don't know if necessarily a lot of people, because he's not. Yeah, he.
Oh, you don't think a Bruce Irvin book would fly out the shelves? Yeah.
I mean, no. I don't think a lot of people necessarily know what's going on with Bruce Irvin and know his backstory. It would be nice if he sort of, over the next few years, became a more impactful player. Not necessarily that he hasn't been an impact, but.
Yeah, I actually don't know what I think the team will do with him. I was thinking about that in terms of thinking who we could cut to make room for Julius. No, I mean just like who might last and who might not. And I feel like the jury is still out on him for me.
I do like him, but that's the same thing with like James Carpenter from like an offensive standpoint is that James Carpenter didn't become what he was drafted to become, which is a solid above average or great tackle, and then he became, pretty much an average, maybe an above average in certain situations left guard. So you wouldn't, and that was not something that they decided to pick up the fifth-year option for. Otherwise, James Carpenter would still be on the team, or he'd be on the team going into next year. Instead, he's going to become a free agent, and that's another thing where I don't know. You don't know if the offensive line, which is already not that good, is going to get worse. We don't know exactly, but that is a position that needs to be filled now.
Yeah, and I'm sure they'll hit that in the draft somewhere. I don't think we've picked up a free agent on the offensive line in years, right? I mean, I don't have the list in front of me, but I can't remember the last time.
I remember when we signed Robert Gallery. That was a very, sort of, oh, is that still a thing? Because, he used to be former number 2 pick and one of Tom Cable's guys, but that didn't last very long.
Yes, then, though, we haven't, I don't think, right?
Yeah, and, I think that's one of those things, we talked briefly about in terms of how to fill certain positions.
Right, and which ones we've had more success drafting versus...
Right. And I think that with offensive line, it's like that's where they put in a lot. Most of all the positions, that's the one where they seem to put in the most draft capital, and it seems like that's also the one that pays off the least for them.
Yeah. Actually, I was saying a similar thing on the other side, which is that it seems like they've been able to slot in all these great, 45-year-old defensive tackles over the last years and ends, but, have had a little bit of trouble developing them, aside from my beloved son, Jordan. And, so what's up with that? I mean, what do you think? Obviously, there's been injuries, so there's a big disclaimer there. I mean, we ended the year with, how many defensive linemen on the IR? A ton, right? So. I
mean, I think by the time that you're down to it, I mean, outside of Tony McDaniel and Kevin Williams, the guys that they went into the season with, as far as the depth, I don't even remember. Yeah, I would struggle to even tell you who the third defensive tackle was in the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
I mean, we were really down to it, and that's the tough thing about that Super Bowl. I feel like I might have said this last week, too, because I've said it a lot, but, man, when they were in that second half of the Super Bowl, that defense was not the defense that they won all season with. I mean, not even close.
When Ava went out, you know what, let's not even. This is like when you're talking to a friend, and they broke up with a guy, and all of a sudden they just slip it back in the conversation, and you're like, we are not talking about this anymore. It's over, moving on. I don't want to go down this road with you, but I feel the same.
I know one road you want to go down a little bit, something that I only heard briefly about. We were talking about Marshawn Lynch, and he was still doing his thing just as good as he's been doing for the past 4 years, including a Beastquake version 2 against the Arizona Cardinals. I think that you might have an interesting story about where you were that day.
Yeah, so unfortunately, I didn't get to watch Beastquake 2 in its entirety because I was watching the game, I think it was December 21st, at Patrick Peterson's mom's house in Florida.
Now, how did you wind up at Patrick Peterson's mom's house?
So I write a column for ESPN the magazine that comes every 2 weeks, and I had this idea of doing a story about so backtrack a little bit. Like many avid fans, when I watch the game, I'm very loud and rude and profane and not a good sport. So I was
Right.
thinking to myself, wow, I bet it would be really difficult to watch a important game with someone's mom. I mean, I wouldn't, you wouldn't say any of the stuff you said. Yeah. So that game was coming up, and I was trying to think of players that, I had commented on unfavorably on the internet over the years, and I just decided to go for it. So I called her up, and she invited me over to watch the game. She's like, oh, we're going to have some people over. Very nice woman, first of all, I should say. Just an absolute doll. So kind, so sweet. So she said, I'm having some people over to watch little Pat work. She was talking about him working. It's his job. So I was in Florida, so I was like, all right, I'm going to go there. So I bought 2 6-packs of beer, thinking, well, what do you bring when you go to someone's house, right? It was like 8 o'clock. I figured there'd be food or whatever. And when I show up, it was pitch black. The party had been canceled. We hadn't connected. So it was just her mom, Patrick's grandmother, and then Patrick's little brother, Avery, who's a cornerback at LSU, who sort of giggled when I asked about Thorold. So that was great.
Did she at any point tell Patrick? I mean, he was busy working, but did Patrick realize that
I don't know.
what was going on?
I conveyed to her that I wore a Seahawks jersey.
Okay.
I was going to wear a Richard Sherman jersey, and then made an executive decision at the last minute not to. So Patrick's little brother answers the door, and I was like pitch black, and I was like, no one was drinking, so we had these beers. And there was no food. And they had their rituals. They watch in this room. It's kind of like a movie theater style setup, and these huge comforters. Patrick's grandma sits in the back, and they all have these like giant bags of popcorn to themselves. She had her big bag of popcorn. By halftime, I was so hungry. We walked away, and I was like, fuck, like, God, I just want some of that popcorn so bad. So I was debating a long time whether to steal her popcorn and reach into her bag. They said some very funny things about Seahawks players and coaches that I won't repeat here. Some very funny commentary. She was a huge Pete Carroll fan, which I thought was really cute, because I guess he had recruited Pat pretty heavily.
But
That's
a very interesting aspect of all this. I mean, I guess it's got to be so weird for a lot of people. Like, there's a lot of coaches in the NFL, but not a lot of them. I mean, I don't even want to try and spend the time to think about it, but not a lot of them have the amount of college cachet of Pete Carroll. Like the amount of people that he has touched in the NFL is insane.
I mean, that's the thing. Whenever you look at a Seahawks, whenever there's talk of a trade prospect or whatever, I would say at least 50% of the time, like, oh, and Pete was interested in him at some point, right, at USC. I mean, I feel like we're still in that generation of players where he has had contact with them, and it is very predictable. But so she adored him. But as you recall, the game was kind of a blowout, and it was so awkward. And Pat almost had an interception. They all went crazy, But and then I'm
trying to figure out where there was a positive end game here, because
there was I thought it was gonna be a close, interesting story. And then Hauschka kept missing kicks in that game, and the whole family would sing "No Flex Zone" when he missed it, which I thought was very cute. But anyways, the game spun out of control, and I was kind of sinking deeper into my seat, trying not to cheer. And when we played 2 points, so as you may remember, Peterson tried to strip the ball instead of tackling him, and then Marshawn just pushed over the safety. It wasn't Honey Badger, it was another safety. And at that point, I was like Homer Simpson backing into the hedge. I was like, I gotta go. So I kind of snaked my way out of there, and they were very nice about it, but it was really awkward.
Yeah, I guess that was sort of the point, right? That
Yeah.
you were going to put yourself in this, because even, let's say, I mean, I guess at the best case scenario for you in terms of not being awkward is if the Seahawks had been blown out. Like, that was the only time where they were like, oh, it's okay, honey child, like, you're doing just fine.
Or if it was close, or if Pat had a big play, maybe, because they're rooting for him, first and foremost. But
What if Pat had, like, got hurt or something like that? Then you're sitting there.
It would have been awful, yeah.
They're, like, devastated, and you're like, oh, I was here to just rub it in your face, I guess. Like,
You know what? I actually couldn't stop myself from cheering a few times during that game. I mean, like,
yeah.
guttural instinct, where I'm just like, ugh, like, I mean, there were so many amazing plays, but.
I mean, even like, yeah, on that particular night, that was one of the top. Yeah, I mean, obviously, I mean, a lot of people, these things get lost very quickly. But I remember at the time that Marshawn Lynch run being what people would say, a lot of people, the best play of the year. So to even subdue yourself a little bit, like that would.
Well, and then because I left, I didn't get to see the Russell Wilson touchdown, where he juked the guy, which was incredibly sick.
Right. I can tell a little bit of a story. It's just that, this past year was the first year that I had spent any time in any press boxes, and I guess there aren't a lot of rules in the press box, and I guess when you're actually told any sort of rule, I guess it does seem sort of practical. But there isn't any cheering allowed in the press box, which, again, it sounds practical, but I guess it's just sort of one of those things that you've never had to suppress before. And I mean, you just have to realize, I guess, that there's two sides in every press box, and there's even a third side, which is a neutral side, and then it's just a matter of we're in here doing business, not anything else. And the funny thing is that the first time I was in a press box, it was the Cowboys and the Saints, which I don't care who wins. It doesn't matter to me in the slightest, right?
Yeah.
But there was a play in that game where DeMarco Murray, it almost looked like it could be the start of a Beastquake type run where he was it looked like he was going nowhere, and then he broke open in the open field. He didn't get as far as Marshawn Lynch might have gotten, which is, I guess, the difference. But there was a moment where it looked like he might break through, and I just remember like cheering, like a little bit, like going, "Go, go!" And I don't know if everybody looked at me, but it felt like that. It definitely felt like everyone was looking at me.
Yeah.
I know the guy like sitting right to my left that were like with the NFL Network were like laughing at me basically.
No, whatever. I mean,
but I got over it. I was just, I cringed for a second, just being like, "Oh, good." But then I get over it because everyone else gets over it. But so that was that, and then I learned that, and I went to a bunch of other games that were neutral, and then finally the culmination of my season was being able to be in the press box for the NFC Championship game, which, and if you're talking about subdued cheering, like that was the most insane game of my life, of any of our lives, to think about how.
I'm sure everyone went crazy during, in the last.
Not really. I mean, that's the thing is that for the first like 3 quarters, and I had the worst seat in the house, and I won't even get into the details, but it was like I just got into the game, which was fine by me, and I didn't have a view basically of the field, but then I would have to like move around in order to watch the game live, which was fine, but when it started getting like to that end of the fourth quarter and things started happening, like I would basically be standing in one place to watch what was happening on the field, and then when something good happened, like an onside kick, basically the press box would be like, like people just, they're taking in their breath and everything like that. But I'll tell you that after all that, like I was basically just not cheering at all, but on the final play I couldn't help but sort of do one of those. I basically ran away from everyone and started jumping up and down. and like being like, ah, like not like basically not, people do that impression and it's like, but I was actually cheering. No, I wasn't cheering. I was literally going, oh my god, oh my god. And yes, but you have to. It's so weird to be in that position where, as a fan, you want to be yourself, but sometimes there's external factors where you're supposed to be respectful, I guess.
Yeah. It's tough.
Have you been in any sort of interesting situations as far as a member of the press?
Well, I mean, I'm a columnist, so I'm pretty open about my, affiliations, I guess. I mean, I wrote about getting a Super Bowl tattoo after the Seahawks won their first Super Bowl, so I don't really have to hide my
Right.
action green and navy blue. But I remember when I met Kenny Lofton and I asked him, what some of his best memories were. That was tough as a Mariners fan.
Right.
But it's hard.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I've always sort of. I remember, when you had told me, I think, or maybe I don't remember if you'd said it on Twitter or had told me and people in public, but it was like you were saying basically that you're transparent about the fact that you're a Seahawks fan, and that's just the way that it is, and that sort of gave me the inspiration to be like, yeah, I mean, everybody's a fan of some team. I mean, you wouldn't be in this business if you didn't have a team, so it's like, obviously you can't be biased. Like, I don't think that you would necessarily want to be, or for me personally, take some sort of bias in that, but I think that's the thing, is that people will call you biased, and it's like, no, the Seahawks are just really, really good right now. Talk to me.
Also for you, because you sort of cast yourself as Andrew Luck's primary nemesis in life.
Right. That's
But anyway, yeah.
The ironic thing about that is that I literally have fans from the Indianapolis Colts, like people that are fans of the Indianapolis Colts. Of all the other teams that exist out there, maybe most of my fans come from Seattle. Obviously, I don't know what would be like the top 10, but somewhere in the top 5, I feel like, is Colts fans, only because they don't agree with me, but they're like, oh, that's funny or whatever, and they noticed me just because I talked so much about Andrew Luck. At this point, I feel like it's behind me, and part of that has to do with the fact that Andrew Luck actually played better. That there was actually like a better Andrew Luck this year, and I think that I actually like Andrew Luck as a human being, and I think he's a great football player that I believe one day will be one of the greats, but just wasn't at this moment when I was saying all those things.
Well, let me ask you another question. Do you like Doug Baldwin? That's called a segue.
Thanks for the tip, A. B. I'll tell you this. Like, there was one of my this is how the closest that I got to being Mina Kimes is that I was on ESPN this year in a way, in that I actually saw my name on ESPN on SportsCenter, because after the NFC Championship game, I was able to take a video of Doug Baldwin ranting at at all the press.
I was misquoted, yeah.
And I remember just sitting down there in this crowded thing, and everyone is like charged up, like all the reporters down there were like, "Oh, that was so cool," and we were just waiting to get in. And so what happens after the game is that after that you go into the locker room and you talk to the players, but they don't let you in immediately. So there's like there's a buffer time and there's a buffer zone. So they allow that time for the players to come in and Pete Carroll to talk to them, and it's their private time, and it usually lasts 5 minutes or something like that. And so while we're all waiting out there, it's obviously it was very unexpected that a player popped out. Like, that doesn't happen ever.
Yeah.
So when it started and his mouth started, like, I'm not usually the type of guy to remember things or do like the thing that seems like, oh, I should be doing this. But for whatever reason, I was like, oh, I should be recording this. And I looked around and nobody else was doing it, and I was like, that's odd. But I was like, screw it, I'm going to do it. And then, so that he started ranting at us. And after he left, all the reporters were like, what is he talking about? Because he was saying, like, you all doubted us. And it's like, no, you are the defending Super Bowl champions, and we know that you're good. And So we all sort of just, a lot of people were just sort of like confused, and I think that's sort of the crux of the situation is that I want to like Doug Baldwin, but at the same time, he just seems like he's mad about a lot of stuff that doesn't exist.
Kind of like shadow boxing, right? My feeling about Doug Baldwin is, it's got to be frustrating to be Doug Baldwin in some ways because I don't know. I've never felt like he's truly. I can't believe I'm saying this sentence. Developed the chemistry with Wilson that he had with Tavares Jackson. But seriously, and I think they were like besties or something. But and none of this really came out when Sydney was on the team. And with regards to his personality, Lenny just walked out. Actually, Lenny's a good example. So I have a small to medium dog. He's sort of a medium. He's like about 20 pounds. And when I take him to the dog park, if there's big dogs there, he's fine. He kind of keeps to himself, runs with the dogs. But when the big dogs leave, he's a total dick. And there's a metaphor in here, right? Which is,
yeah, I gotcha.
like, Seattle has, there's been no big dogs in the dog park over there for a while. And that's kind of why I didn't want Larry Fitzgerald, not to, again, segue, but on some level, I did like having that check, right, for Baldwin. Just that veteran presence, or at least kind of a big dog to kind of keep the pack in check. And I do feel like the position group is sort of missing that.
It is a good point. Like on that offense, like with Marshawn Lynch refusing to talk and with Russell Wilson having nothing to say, it's like who's going to be the guy that speaks up? And it's Doug Baldwin, and it's like, oh man, like the thing is that you're not like that's the thing, and that's the funny thing too is that Doug Baldwin, for as much as he seems not to like the media, he also seems to be the player on the team that pays most attention to the media. Like if anybody is listening to this right now on the team, it's Doug Baldwin.
No.
Like someone's basically, I don't know, or maybe like Doug Baldwin has a lot of spies out there, so it's like, if someone's gonna listen to this, and then they'll be like tweet at Doug Baldwin, and then Doug Baldwin will find the part that's about him, and then he'll.
It really doesn't bother me, honestly. Whatever. Unless a player is doing horrible things off the field, it doesn't bother me if they're sensitive or his behavior. I could care less. But the fact that we don't have a big target bothers me more.
Oh, sure. Yeah, that's the thing is that, Doug Baldwin's crime is that he talks a little bit bigger than his bite, and that's about it. But, he's a good player. He's a limited player, but he's a good player. I think that as far as catches go, the guy is a phenomenal player. Like I've seen him make some catches that just blow your mind. Like he could be I think as far in terms of making the unbelievable catch, he could be a top 10, top 15 guy. Like some of those catches he makes are crazy. In terms of actually being a threat, like you say, having a big target, he's never going to be.
Help him so much, right? That's the thing. I mean, about receiver groups is if you had that, whatever, Mike Evans or whatever in there, it would help Doug Baldwin be so much better, right? I mean.
Oh, for sure, absolutely. That's the thing is that.
Yeah, right. He's a number 2 and playing a number 1, right? And
like we go back. I mean, there was his rookie year in which he was undrafted free agent and he became the best receiver on the team immediately, which was like, oh wow, that's crazy, that's awesome. And then there was the second year he didn't do anything, and that was I guess that was 2012. So that was the year that he had not seemed to have gotten on the page with Wilson at all.
Exactly. Yeah.
And then the third and the fourth year, he had Golden Tate, and so it was like him and Golden Tate was really the more talented player as far as, who to rely on a more consistent basis. And then this year, there was no Golden Tate, there was no Percy Harvin. It was Doug Baldwin and, Jermaine Kearse and.
One of the things about the Seahawks offense is it's not like when we get hot, we just keep hitting the same guy over and over. When we get hot, you suddenly see all the receivers starting to get catches, right? It happens as a group. And that's why it's so important to me in this offseason to add that extra component to help the rest of the group.
I can't get away from the fact that the Seahawks, I mean, when we're talking about where they put their draft capital and their money, like a lot of people say, oh, this offense doesn't need like that kind of receiver, like they did X and Y without it, and it's like, well, it doesn't seem like Pete Carroll and John Schneider agree with you because they spent a whole lot of money on Sidney Rice, they spent a whole lot of money on Percy Harvin, they drafted Golden Tate in the second round, they drafted Paul Richardson in the second round. They're trying, they're just not very good at it.
That's such a good point, and yeah, I know it blows my mind when people think that they're not interested in filling that need. The Richardson thing really throws a wrench in the plan. I mean, this year's draft is just so important. Can't be stated enough, in my opinion.
Now, do you know anything about Dorial Green Beckham?
Oh man. Yeah.
I know I threw a wrench at you right now because we didn't.
No, yeah. I mean, I guess not to take it back to the combine, but you always see the same story over and over, which is that the physical aspects of the combine don't really mean anything. It all comes down to the interviews, and I mean, but this is all mood, right? They're gonna draft in their first 3 picks are gonna be dudes we've never heard of. I'll bet $100. Like I guarantee you, whoever they pick, it's not gonna be one of the guys we're talking about. It's gonna be some rando, who we Google. I mean.
No. The combine exists to satisfy people that don't matter. I mean, in my opinion, it's like.
Are you subtweeting Danny right now?
I think that if I had been able to go to the combine, like, I mean, that's the thing is that if I wanted to go to the combine, I would have had to get myself there, and I'm not gonna do that. But I would love to go to the combine and just experience it. I just think that it's complete garbage. Not garbage, but bullshit. So let me upgrade that garbage to a bullshit and say the only reason that they're there is to confirm the things that they already knew. So it's like, is Marcus Mariota going to be fast for a quarterback? Of course, And if Marcus Mariota had run like a terrible 40, they would have said, oh, well, I guess he's having a bad day. And if he had run, basically it's just everybody's out there to confirm things they knew, and if they look bad, they're not going to really care. Like Andre Smith of the Bengals, there's a guy that like 6 or 7, maybe 6 years ago, maybe 5, 6 years ago, who cares? Why am I going over how many years ago it was? But Andre Smith of the Bengals was a guy that was like, oh, this guy could be a number 1 or number 2, number 3 pick, and then he goes in the combine and he's overweight, and he has like one of the worst combines of all time.
And Vontae's Perfect, another Bengal, I think he ran like a 6-second 40 or something. No, not 6-second, but he was terrible at the combine.
Right.
And that didn't turn out so bad.
But Andre Smith was basically like, so despite the fact that he had this terrible combine and the combine will make you and break you, he went 6th overall. So it's like, in that case, it was like, oh, well, so you can have a terrible combine, but if you liked all their game tape after those 3 or 4 years, you're fine with it, right? And Vontaze Burfict, exactly. It's just a different example because Burfict was harmed by all of the shit that he did in college. Again, like there's a guy that gets penalized 2 times a game, and he's got issues and he's a bad like influence and all this kind of stuff. So he does become an undrafted free agent, and then what? Like he still becomes a great linebacker in the NFL, and it's. Yeah,
there's been a lot of studies on this, whether there's, predictive abilities, and I think almost universally it's always that it doesn't predict anything. I think the position that actually is most closely tied, NFL success and combine success is defensive end. I recall reading that somewhere, which is kind of interesting, but for the most part, it doesn't mean anything.
Right. I guess, that can come into play in terms of like, different, I don't know, I'm going to try not to talk out of my ass, so I won't say too much as far as my opinions of what it means for defensive ends, but I'm sure that, I'm not saying that the combine is without value, but it's definitely not with very much value, and it's like, I just think of all the years, it hasn't proven to be a great predictor of success. Other people have commented that it's more to make sure that to check out their injury history, and it's like, well, great, you could give physicals and be done in 6 hours. Like, I don't know, like if that was all that it was, it's basically that still doesn't change the fact that guys can be hurt even if they're completely healthy, and it doesn't change the fact that guys can be completely hurt from the beginning, like a Frank Gore, and never be hurt for their entire careers.
Yeah.
So what exactly is it doing to benefit us? Because every draft that came before the Combine had Hall of Famers at the top and on Pro Bowlers and all this kind of stuff, and they didn't have shit to go off of other than maybe what they found out from their college coaches or game film or word of mouth or just common sense. Like, did Bo Jackson need to go to a Combine and run a 4.2 to realize that this guy was a ridiculously good football player? No.
Yeah, no. Right. And it's just interviews, usually seem to be the thing that's cited as the most important, but we don't get to see that. So,
I mean,
yeah.
that's the thing, is that here we are, it's February 19th or whatever, and people just need something to talk about. And
We just filled 5 minutes. So.
yeah, exactly. We did it. We talked about it, and a lot of people will probably spend more.
Yeah.
I'm much looking forward to if anyone gets franchise tagged in the next week, then we can talk about that. And then March 10th is free agency, and then that'll fill up, really free agency will fill up in the first week, and then maybe trickle down for the second week. I love to talk about the draft, and that's going to be a tough period of time in between when free agency is really dead and then the draft. And then
I mean, I love the draft more because what it says about who isn't drafted, you know what I mean? Like when you look at the positional groups they target, and it's sort of what it says about the positional groups they don't target in terms of their confidence in players they already have. That's always fascinating to me.
right.
Not to you or whatever, but anyway, yeah, this is a dark times for football fans for sure.
Yeah, it's they suck us in and they addict us during the season, and then they take it away, but then they give us this other stuff. So it's not bad. And yeah, so I think that covers all of our topics for the day.
All right. Wait, you promised me that I get to make a pitch for my favorite deep cut Seahawk.
Oh, please. Well, first of all, how did Jordan Hill become your official son?
I don't know. I guess he did something great maybe midway through the season. I mean, he is by far the most exciting player from the 2013 draft, obviously. Maybe the only exciting player,
Right.
which is, worrisome, deeply, deeply worrisome. But I think I just tweeted something, my son, I don't know. And then it kind of took off from there. People are like, what are you feeding him? More. I think he's fantastic. I mean, I just reviewing his numbers from the year and thinking about what he might do over full season if he continues to develop at that rate is really exciting. I don't know. Who's your favorite deep cut Seahawk? Who's your pet on the team?
Yeah, I mean, well, definitely, I think Jordan Hill has definitely elevated above the deep cut. So when you took him on as a son, he wasn't quite there yet. Now your son's all grown up. So and then if you got B.J. Daniels as your true deep cut, I think you're just setting yourself up for failure because that guy's not going to be around for a long time.
Wow, that's harsh. I don't know if you noticed, but Schneider specifically mentioned him and Norwood recently as players he's excited about. So.
Well, I guess my deep cut would probably be Norwood. I mean, that's personally where I was going to go with it. And there is no rationality to these answers. I mean, I think that, and that's the thing, because people can talk about how Norwood looked in college, or people can talk about how Norwood looked in a game or whatever preseason.
Like 10 catches, right? Approximately.
Yeah. So it's like I don't really care about any of that stuff because if you were to talk about Chris Matthews, I mean, here's a guy that had over 100 yards in the Super Bowl, and it doesn't prove anything other than the fact that in one game, Chris Matthews can come down with a couple catches, and I like that about him, especially on this team, considering. But yeah, so I don't really have any rational reason to believe that Kevin Norwood's going to be good or great, but that would be the guy that I sort of link onto as my son or my stepson.
Your distant cousin.
Yeah. Well, what guy? We also talked about. Did you have any thoughts as far as because someone was telling me the other day. Well, not the other day, but I guess I just forget. But someone was talking about how Hugh Millen was a former player on the Seahawks, and I guess to me, growing up and not being a fan of the Seahawks being too young at the time Hugh Millen was on the team, that it was like, oh, I didn't even realize because these guys
Yeah.
aren't like good like star players that I know of, or even sometimes they're good players and it's just you get lost in time. So
Mm.
we talked about maybe current team members that could have a future in broadcasting. Did you have any sort of? Did you come to a conclusion on that?
So obvious choice is Richard Sherman, but I think he's a little too manic. I mean, he's incredibly intelligent. He's great at breaking down plays in interviews I've read. So just going, but like I said, I think he's a little too quick. He'd have to slow down a bit. So the two players that I think have the most charisma and enjoy being in front of the camera are Bennett and John Ryan, who's sort of becoming a more public figure. Uh,
Right.
so those are my two picks. What about you?
That's good. I mean, that's true about John Ryan. He's very
He's fun.
he likes the attention and he's funny. Not like he craves attention. I mean, I crave attention, but like not like I think most people crave some sort of attention. But he seems to enjoy the fact that he's John Ryan, which isn't a bad thing. And you know, if we're sticking around in the old special teams units, you know, I think that and I'm just gonna say it. I think Steven Hauschka is a really good-looking guy, so I could see him being on camera. Like he's a personable guy, and I think that he's a very good-looking guy. So maybe Steven Hauschka could take on a sort of broadcasting role. Although I'm struggling to figure out if any kickers actually ever took
Yeah, I
that
was gonna say, I
route.
think or punters for that matter.
Right, but I would say that most kickers are weirdos and punters too. And neither Ryan or Hauschka necessarily strike me as a weirdo. So
Yeah.
it's possible that one of those guys. I do think Michael Bennett. I think he's just too much of a wild card. I don't know if you could put him on live TV.
Yeah, well, a lot can change in 10 years, so we'll have
Right.
to see.
I think that they could say the same thing about Warren Sapp, but then look how that turned out. So you could say that these guys, hey, we got these guys that are a little weird or a little wild, and then it's like so long, and you put Warren Sapp on the air, or you put Rush Limbaugh on ESPN or whatever, and it's like, I can't believe that didn't turn out so well. And it's like, well, you got to find, like, I feel like those guys that are loud and outlandish, but also vanilla, sort of like a Shaquille O'Neal, some guys like that can sort of like Shaquille O'Neal. I think Richard Sherman falls into that same category, is that
Yeah.
they're loud and they're confident and they say funny things, but they're also kind of vanilla. Like you don't feel like Richard Sherman. I think I've heard this, but I don't think Richard Sherman has ever drank or doesn't drink alcohol or anything like that. So
Mm,
it's like one of those things where it's like, yeah, they're loud and they're confident.
yeah.
When we're talking about Doug Baldwin versus Richard Sherman, it's like people say about Richard Sherman, oh, I hate that guy, he's so annoying, but respect. He's really good.
But when he
And
talks about football, his love for the game just emanates from him, and he's able, he when he breaks down a play or really gets into the nitty-gritty, it's so fascinating and revealing and just engrossing. So if he was able to bring that, to a TV job, that'd be fantastic. I would watch that forever.
did you have any sort of guttural reaction on that Super Bowl when they showed the replay of Richard Sherman's face as the play was breaking down?
I actually haven't watched the P reactions. People keep tweeting them. They should be like a not safe for work tag because I don't know. I mean, I haven't. I've seen the Richard Sherman one, unfortunately, and it's like incredibly painful to watch.
It's like terrifying. You can see it really looks like he's seeing someone that he loves get killed.
I mean, I made the same fate. I look at that, I'm like, yeah, I literally just started zipping up my coat, walked like stone face. I was in a group of, I mean, whatever. This is like that thing where your friend keeps bringing up their ex, and you're like, no, we agreed not to talk about this, so let's just cut this off here.
It is interesting that it seems like it was so long ago, and it wasn't even like 3 weeks. But I guess That's just the thing that happens is we want to put that so far behind us, which is fine.
I'm really trying not to think about it.
We gotta, in order to heal, you gotta feel. That's
Good enough to end on.
Is that a saying, or did I just make that up?
I think you just made it up.
In order to heal, you gotta feel, folks. And speaking of which, in order to reel, you gotta field. That's my new catchphrase, reel in the field. Mina, are we all good now?
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming on. You did a great job of guest hosting, and maybe next time Danny won't be so lazy and won't go to the combine, and he can host, and you can just be a guest. How does that sound?
Sounds great.
All right. Remember, guys. JoJo and XP Rico, thank you for the theme song here, and you didn't know that you did it, but Mina, thanks for coming on, and hopefully Marshawn Lynch, within the next couple days, guarantees himself to stay in Seattle for at least another year. How does that sound? All right. Stay tuned next week. We'll be back with regularly scheduled Danny. Goodbye.
So I